The Nativity scene, a dream which begins when we are children and continues into adulthood, in our homes as Christmas approaches. It opens up a world which resembles a simple and colourful one that we witnessed as children, but above all, we can see once more the child who caused the world to be reborn.
The Nativity scene is of great significance. Jesus became poor to contest riches as a source of happiness, because it is not true. He became humble to contest pride as an expression of greatness. It is not true that the proud are great. He became meek to contest violence as an instrument to change history. It's not violence which changes history. Poverty, humility, and meekness is a great lesson of Christmas, and before this lesson I stand enchanted.
The Nativity scene is a journey within our memories as Christians, which takes us back to where everything began. It's like the journey of the pilgrims who, upon arriving in the Bethlehem of today, seek the Bethlehem of 2,000 years ago, with the same wonder and joy in their hearts as the shepherds who crowded in front of the crib. The Basilica of the Nativity is in the heart of the city, and the Franciscan Fathers are its custodians and the reference point for Christians in the Holy Land.
In Bethlehem, it's always Christmas. Every day is Christmas, but in Bethlehem, reality has to be confronted.
When Jesus was born, the city was under the control of Roman soldiers. Even today, the pilgrim who looks for the grotto, with a desire to kneel down on the piece of ground on which God, who became a newborn child, was placed, finds himself in contact with soldiers, barbed wire, and a wall which is above all a wall of incomprehension between peoples.
Christmas heralds the arrival of Jesus and therefore a certainty, whilst instead certainties in the Middle East are very few. This year for Christmas I believe that it is important to look to Jesus, lose ourselves in Him and find ourselves in Him.
Look to Jesus. In these words of the Franciscan custodian can be found the real experience of the Nativity. The same experience that the founder of the order, St. Francis of Assisi, wished to be the first to live through. It was 1223 when in the village of Greccio in the mountains of Rieti, one of his favourite destinations during his walks, Francis asked the nobleman Giovanni Velita to set up the scene of the Nativity, in words quoted by his first biographer, Thomas of Celano.
I would like to depict the child of Jesus in Bethlehem and somehow see with my own eyes the difficulties he faced because of the lack of things that are necessary to a newborn child.
In his infinite desire for God, Francis's requests made him the spokesperson of man's need to see, to touch, to live our Lord, reconstructing the circumstances which awaited him. Today this place has become the heart of a sanctuary which conserves nativity scenes built in every part of the world and entrusted to the Franciscans who, here as in the Holy Land, are the custodians of the Nativity. This continuity is represented in the double scene visible in the 4th century fresco in the Grotto of the Nativity. On one side is ancient Bethlehem, where Mary nourished the baby with great solemnity and simplicity, and on the other the new Bethlehem, as Thomas of Celano calls it, thanks to whom we know what took place on that Christmas night of 1233.
Erano davvero molti gli abitanti di quella notte.
There were a great number of inhabitants that night who arrived festively and joyously with lighted torches. That night the Eucharist was celebrated, Francis being dressed as a deacon, proclaiming the New Testament and giving the sermon. And in this place where we are today, Francis brought in the manger, the crib, the hay and the oxen and the donkeys.
In the Nativity of Greccio there is neither Mary, nor St. Joseph, nor the child, but only an ox, a donkey, Francis, the nobleman Giovanni Velita and his wife and family, and the inhabitants of Greccio.
Perché gli abitanti potessero contemplare, vedere e ripensare a quel grande mistero dell'umiltà
in order for the inhabitants to contemplate, witness, and reflect on the great mystery of humility, and reflect on God who became poor for us. God lived, became flesh, and came among us. He knew weakness. He became a child. Francis wanted to somehow relieve the mystery of God's tenderness towards each one of us.
Il mistero di tenerezza di Dio verso ciascuno di noi.
The inhabitants of Greccio were the protagonists of that nativity, as they are today in the living nativity scene which is erected each year at the feet of the sanctuary. Thomas of Celano tells us that Francis and all those present were visited by a vision of a baby which appeared on the hay in the manger.
Dice appunto che questo bambino viene
He says that this baby is resurrected in the hearts of many who had forgotten him. This seems to me to be extremely beautiful because Francis reminds us that Bethlehem is each of us, each time that we welcome it. We can truthfully say that God was born in vain, if not born in our hearts.
The history of the nativity scene is born Franciscan and continues as such until around 1280 a Franciscan Pope, Nicholas IV, in remembrance of the events at Greccio, asks Arnolfo of Cambio to sculpture 8 statuettes representing the characters of the Nativity, and he places them in the Marian Basilica, where 9 centuries earlier, Pope Sixtus III had created a grotto of the Nativity similar to that of Bethlehem. As well as this first nativity scene in stone in that basilica, today known as Santa Maria Maggiore, elements of what is believed to be the Holy Crib are conserved. There too the process of the stratification of the memory of the Nativity takes place, which centuries later is transferred into the hands of those who, in particular Naples, made of the Nativity an art.
The Neapolitan nativity scene is that of the 18th century because clearly that was the period of its maximum splendour, in which King Charles III of Bourbon himself was involved, together with his wife, in creating a nativity scene at the royal residence. Great artists of worldwide fame were involved.
A young talented nativity scene maker speaks to us about it. Giuseppe Ercolano, who in his small workshop in Sorrento builds throughout the year nativity shepherds and is an interpreter and heir of an art which was born as a refined art, destined for noble palaces and which only became popular at the end of the 19th century.
Il presepe napoletano del Settecento è realizzato, insomma...
The 18th century Neapolitan nativity scene is built following specific criteria, basically with 3 scenes. The first scene is located in a rural environment where the shepherds with their flocks stand in the presence of an angel announcing the coming of Christ.
Annuncia la lieta novella.
The second scene, the Diversorium, is the most pagan. A tavern in which the imagination of the Neapolitans has taken over with the inclusion of glimpses of everyday life. The third and central scene is that of the Nativity, in which the Holy Family is often placed amidst the ruins of a pagan temple, representing the victory of Christianity over paganism.
The art of the nativity scene is a transversal art, which is nourished by the in-depth knowledge of different materials and many different working methods, besides a great deal of patience.
Del passaggio dall'argilla alla fase di modellatura.
From the clay to the modelling phase of the head, the finishing and carving of the wood where the hands and feet are concerned, to the baking, and then the insertion of the eyes, the colouring, the sewing of the clothes and the dressing, this takes about a week.
The richness of the work of these artisans is the knowledge that they are depositories of a memory which was born long ago. And every year artists and artisans work together to create the nativity scene, which is perhaps the most well-known in the world, certainly the most visible, the one in St. Peter's Square, which is rediscovered every night at Christmas.
Il presepe di Piazza San Pietro ha ormai 30 anni, è iniziato nel 1982.
The nativity scene in St. Peter's Square is 30 years old. It started in 1982 according to the wishes of His Holiness John Paul II, who wanted it placed in St. Peter's, and that the Nativity should also be remembered with less Christian but more northern symbols, such as the Christmas tree.
A symbol with great impact relaunched every year by television stations all over the world, which requires careful teamwork. In the 30 years which have passed since it was first staged, the nativity scene has grown in scale.
From the initial 8 statues, we've now reached 10 to 15, all made and decorated by our dear nuns, who then dressed them.
The final touch to the scene is given, in point of fact, by the Franciscan nuns at the Vatican Laboratory for the restoration of tapestries and fabrics, a job which requires great creativity and lasts many months of the year. Artisan creativity, with its study of details and colours, the attention to detail of the figures combine art with faith.
La fede è una armonia nel cuore dell'amore di
Faith
Dio.
needs art. Faith is harmony in the heart, in the love of God, in our responses. We are human too. We need to touch, to feel, to hear, to express our faith. Art speaks and can also awaken a desire for God.
The nativity scene, light and dark, 1,000 forms, colours, moss, 1,000 ways which make us relive a mystery which is renewed every year and which brings us back to the foundations of the Christian faith. When we create a nativity scene, when we look at it, then we touch it with our hands and look with our eyes at the history of our rebirth as humanity, that rebirth which is accomplished through the resurrection of Jesus.
Guardiamo alla grotta di Betlemme. Dio si abbassa fino ad essere...
Look at the grotto of Bethlehem. God came down to rest in a stable, which was a prelude to his descent in the hour of his passion.
Il culmine della storia di amore.
The culmination of the love story between God and man passes through the stable of Bethlehem and the tomb in Jerusalem.
E il sepolcro di Gerusalemme.
This is the extraordinary opportunity that we have as Christians for a renewed meeting with God, which started and continues to begin every year in front of a crib.